Hello everyone, this is Take from bigheadtaco.com and welcome to BHT Studios. This is my first impressions review of the brand new Fujifilm GFX 50R. So let's start now. So first things first, this is a pre-production copy that I was able to get from Fujifilm Canada. So thank you so much, Billy. There was a kind of a PR event that went across Canada with Patrick Larocque and Billy as he went from Toronto, Montreal, and then finally here in Vancouver to sort of feature not just the GFX 50R, but what it is like to have it in the hands of a working professional. And during that event, Billy did say he didn't want to talk too much about the specs, but really it was all about how someone like Patrick can use a camera like this in his art and in his photography. But you know, most of us were there because we wanted to touch and play with this camera. And I was able to shoot with it the entire day. I've had it for a couple days and I have it for a couple of more days. And so I wanted to kind of go over the things that I like about this, what you can look forward to. And so let's talk about that. The 50S kind of had a Hasselblad Rolleiflex, like a lot of the medium format film cameras. They had a proprietary type connector, and I didn't like it because it was a lot harder to put on third-party straps. This thing has the normal circular eyelet that takes the ring type, and so I could put any of my hipster straps. This is a Barton 1972 strap, but you know, I use other straps as well, so I can just use my existing straps. No need to get any kind of a special clip, and this way I notice on very secure. So every time there's a new kind of a camera, like Fujifilm tries to think about how a photographer will shoot, and they often come up with a brand new way of how we interact with the camera. So meaning they just don't grab the same shutter button from the previous camera or the same dial from the previous one and just slap it on and assume that, you know, that's, you know, it's gonna drop their costs, and as well as make everyone who shot the previous camera more familiar. So they did change quite a few things, and some of it is actually, I would say most of it makes a lot of sense. So there's a new on and off switch, which is in the top right corner. Now we're used to having it on the other X series, that the on and off switch is kind of wrapped around the shutter dial, but its position as it being separate makes sense because instead of having the front dial, which we're used to having it down here, because the camera is so much bigger, it makes sense because, you know, where your hand lands, your finger kind of naturally lands right here, and that's where your front dial is. It's wrapped around the shutter dial, which to me makes a lot of sense. So the on and off, you know that's in the top right corner. Once you know where it is, you don't even need to look. You know, I already know when it's on and off by just quickly hitting the switch over there. So to me, that was a very smart change. As well, I prefer having an exposure compensation dial. The GFX 50S and the XH1 went towards this weird kind of a, you know, both those have big grips, and what they did was they ended up having a little LCD top panel and a funny button that you press and then you use one of the front or rear dials, and I didn't find that intuitive. For us, Fujifilm X shooters, right from the X100 to the X Pro series, to the XE series, to the XT series, we're always used to having that exposure comp dial back here. And so I think it's a natural spot for it, and I'm happy that they brought it back to the 50R. Now, Fujifilm, they don't call this a rangefinder because technically it is not. It is in a rangefinder-esque format. And so the viewfinder is to the far left, and because this viewfinder has been pushed to the far left, the diopter is to the far left, and it would be easily knocked if there wasn't some kind of a locking system. And like on the XT3, they do have a push. You pull out, you adjust the diopter, and then you push it back in, and then it locks into place. So that's another well thought out feature. And even if we look to the back, there's been a lot of things that have been moved around because there's so much real estate in the back. There's so much space back here that a lot of the buttons, for instance, the 50S had the plate button kind of up top here, and there's the same spot where the autofocus, the single, continuous, and manual was kind of on top and down, and it was a really weird spot. Now Fujifilm on the R has moved the play button down here, so when you shoot, you quickly take a picture, and then you could just hit play, and you can review your images right away without having to change your hand position, and that's great. And as well, moving the focus control to the top here, and you got your view mode to the far left, which makes sense. Delete button is also in a good spot. These two buttons here, which is usually the AFL and the AEL buttons, although you can customize it to whatever you want, it's in the spot where your thumb will naturally hit the inner button just right there. They could be more prominent. It's too flush, just like this in the X-T3 and the X-T2 and almost all the other Fujifilm cameras except the X-H1. The X-H1 has the AFL and the AEL buttons much bigger and more prominent, more like a DSLR, and this is really flush. I don't really see a reason for it being so flush, though. Fujifilm, I wish these were bigger. I'm glad you didn't label it so we can choose what it will be called, but still a little bit too flush. As you notice here, there's no D-pad, but you do have a touch screen and you do have the joystick. And so if you look at the back here, what does this remind you of? It reminds us a lot of the X-E3, doesn't it? So when the X-E3 first came out, it was the first X series that had the joystick with touch control and no D-pad. And at first people were skeptical, but those of us that did learn to shoot with the X-E3, we actually kind of liked having that cleaner aesthetic in the back, as well as relying more on the joystick and touchscreen features. And same with the GFX 50R, I got used to it right away, and as soon as I grabbed it, other than the monstrous size difference, in terms of shooting experience, it's very similar. You can even see where the play button is, and the other buttons along the side of the screen here, display back and then plays on the bottom. Here the display back is on the bottom and the plays in the middle, but pretty much you shoot very similar. If you shoot the X-E3, which is also a rangefinder sort of a layout type camera, you'll be very comfortable shooting with the GFX 50R. Having no D-pad means you lose 4 of the FN buttons, but you do gain 4 swipe functions. And again, those of you that have got the latest, the X-T3, the X-H1, the GFX 50S, you might not like it or you do like it. I find that some of the secondary features that I don't access as often, so something like the film profiles, I don't mind that it's swiped. Stuff that I want access to right away, and that's something I use very often, I do put it to a dedicated button like ISO or white balance. And so I find that great. In fact, with the 50R, you have, first of all, it's one of the first Fujifilm bodies where the front button often it just is not in a natural place, but in the R, my middle finger lands right there. So if there's a feature that you access quite often and you don't want to put it to these back buttons, I say put it in the front. So let's say it is ISO, put it right there because it's a very easy accessible button there, as well as the push. The rear dial is push in, and typically Fujifilm defaults it to magnify, and I like it magnified, so I like to keep that there. And I do make sure that this is a autofocus lock and this is auto exposure lock, and I use that for these two. You get an extra button here above the Q, but because this is kind of where your thumb rests, it's not a natural spot that you can access right away, so maybe something more obscure can go. I can't even remember what I put on the button above the Q. Is actually wireless communication. And that's something that I do use when I'm in the field. I take a picture and then I want to transfer the images right away to my smartphone. So it's in a kind of an obscure spot. I could have put it up here as well. That's a common place to put it. And even the dedicated drive button here can be reconfigured to be some other custom function. So overall, you get, let me see here. What happens here? You get 4 FN buttons with the thumb on the back, so it includes the rear push dial. So you get 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so you can program those 4, and as well you get 4 swipe, so that's another 4, and then you get 2 buttons on the top, and you get 1 more button on the front. So that's the total of, what is that? I think that's 11 custom function buttons. So that's quite a bit of custom functioning for your custom functioning needs. Now, as I was mentioning, it's a lot like the X-E3, the 50R, because they're both rangefinder kind of designed camera bodies, but one thing that this R has, and it's funny, it seems like when it comes to their digital medium format, maybe it's a different team, but they seem to take more risks. I remember when the touchscreen feature that first appeared on the X70, Fujifilm did not put it on the X-T2. They didn't put it on any of the more the Pro series body. A lot of people had said, you know, the XE3 on the X Pro 2, they may have given you a joystick, but they didn't give you articulating screen or touch at the same time. This thing has no D-pad, it has a touch screen, it has a joystick, and it has an articulating screen, which is fantastic. Now, some may say they don't need it, and that's great. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. But the fact that you do get it is great, because I find that this is still a pretty big camera. It feels smaller than the 50S, but it's not that much smaller. It's just the shape makes more sense, and it's definitely way more flat because of the repositioning of where the battery is. But when you're shooting on the street, it's still quite a large camera to put up to your eye and to take a picture of someone. And so having the rear LCD screen, but as well as being able to pull this down, and when you're shooting, you know, you can shoot down here like this, almost like with a Hasselblad or like a Rolleiflex, shooting down like an old film medium format camera makes a lot more sense. It does allow you to shoot a little bit more discreetly, and because it is flatter this way, the 50S sticks out this far, and then when it articulates, it's still quite a bit of space this way, so it still keeps you nice and compact. So I actually liked the articulating screen, and I think this paves the way for the X Pro 3 and the XE4 or XE3S or whatever they're going to call it to have an articulating screen. I think it really should be. I think Olympus with their rangefinder styled cameras always had an articulating screen, and I think it's about time that Fujifilm does put an articulating screen on all their cameras. Other than that, the guts of this is pretty much the same as the 50S. There's a few differences. The 50R does have Bluetooth. It does have USB Type-C, but it is the 3.1 standard. The S has the 3.0 standard, so the throughput is probably very similar, but you know, this is more updated. The viewfinder is the same. It's the same 0.5-inch 3.69 million dot viewfinder, but magnification is different. The 50S has a 0.85 magnification. This has a 0.77, which is the same as what the X-T2 has. So it's no slouch. It's definitely big enough, but unlike the other cameras, unlike the X-T2, the X-H1, and the X-T3 that has the 100 frames per second in boost mode, it feels pretty laggy, especially when it gets in low light. Outdoors, bright daylight, it's fine, but as the light levels drop, this is contrast detect only, and then as you start looking through there, you do start seeing that lag in here. But again, for digital media format, I guess that's kind of what we have to put up with until they put a faster processor in here instead to get it a little bit more gas, a little bit more boost. In terms of weight, it's 775 grams versus the GFX 50S's 825. So in terms of volume, I did multiply the length, height, and depth, and it is about 20% smaller, 15-20% in terms of volume smaller. So it comes down to where the dimension is. So it's slightly taller, it's slightly wider, but it's much thinner than the 50S. And so if you do have a 50S and you like it for its modular ability, which is very typical of a medium format camera. So if you think of like the Hasselblad 500 series or any of the, even Fujifilm, I think it's the GX series, it was a GX 680, I think it was. It was a fully modular medium format camera that had swappable out viewfinders, prism, focus screens. You could put different backs. You know, it was designed to be in the studio, out in the field, on a tripod, and you can modify it to your own needs. And that's really what the 50S is all about. You can even completely remove the viewfinder to make everything even more compact. Or you could put on the swivel head, the tilt head. You could do so many things on a tripod. The battery comes out sideways. All the connections come out the side, and you had that cable, the cable tree, the cable protector. This thing, all the connections are on the, so the USB Type-C is on the side here, on the side, which is in a kind of an odd spot. But even even more odd is the actually looks like USB-C, I'm sorry. The HDMI connections on the side and the USB Type-C's on the bottom, and the remote control. It looks like there's another button. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's a remote release on the bottom, and the power connection is also from the bottom. So it's not really designed to be a studio camera. It does have a PC sync terminal here, so you could use it. But if I had a choice to have a camera in the studio and it to be very modular, I would definitely get the 50S because it's designed to be so. And we know that when Fujifilm was designing the 50S, they did talk to a lot of landscape, architectural, and studio photographers to kind of see what their needs were. And when that came out, a lot of people, the first thing we complained about is from the front view, it looked really sexy and awesome. And as soon as you saw it from the side or top, it just had that funny hump in the back. And so this makes a lot more sense to me for a Fujifilm aesthetic. In terms of size and weight, I actually have friends that have the Texas Leica and I played around with it. It's almost the same size and weight, and I will get a Texas Leica in my hand so I can actually compare the two, but it feels about that size. And we know that the first few X-series cameras, the X100, the X Pro 1, the XE3, the XE1, they were all in the rangefinder styling. And so this is more in line with Fujifilm's aesthetic. For me, this seems more like what I wanted. What I actually do want from Fujifilm is to create a true rangefinder medium format camera, which they probably won't do it, but more like an X100F, but in digital medium format. So having a non-interchangeable 35mm equivalent built-in lens, having a hybrid optical and EVF viewfinder built in, and that way it would make the lens more compact, because you can see where the sensor is on this camera right there. That's where the sensor is. But if they had it built in, the sensor would be further back, which means the lens would be further in. And so it makes everything more compact. Now with the 50R, I find that the GF63 or the 50mm equivalent is the most compact so far of all the GF lenses. And so for me, this is kind of the combo that I like. GFX 50R with the GF 63mm lens. Now in terms of price, it is starting off right now. So I got all this pricing off of B&H. They seem to have the most kind of the standardized retail pricing out there. It's $44.99 US for the 50R body by itself, or $51.99 with this lens, the GF63. And that's actually a smoking deal, just over $5,000 US for a body and lens. Now comparing that with the 50S, the current price right now, which is October of 2018, is $54.99, so it's $1,000 more for the 50S. And when you get it with the same lens, the 63, it's $66.48. So you can see you're getting a pretty killer deal. There's a $700 premium when you buy the R with this lens here, where you're paying over $1,000 at this time bundled with this lens on the 50S. And so that's where the deal is, buying the GFX 50R. And when the pancake comes out, maybe there'll be even a better deal. Maybe it'll be under, and my guess will be under $5,000 US for that combination, which is fantastic. Looking at other manufacturers, Pentax 645Z is currently just under $5,500 US and just under $6,200 US with their standard 75mm, and it looks like it's a pancake lens. Hasselblad X1D is currently, it's funny, on B&H, the silver model is about $6,500 US, but the black model is almost $8,000, but that's still quite a bit of a price reduction from when it first came out, and I think a lot of it has to do with the release of the GFX system, that Hasselblad had to drop the price or it would be a hard sell. But $6,500 for the X1D in silver, $79.95 for it in black, and with their standard 45mm lens, which is about a 35mm standard, is $98.95. And the reason why I talk about this, the Pentax 645Z and the Hasselblad X1D, is because they all share the same Sony the 4x3 sensor. It's the 50, approximately 50 megapixel, 44 by 33 millimeter approximate sensor size. And so they all have the same sensor, but of course we know that color science via the processor and other things will make a difference on how the file looks like. And all three of them are Bayer style. The Fujifilm does not have a AA filter, and they have things like the color chrome effect, which I'll put a link down below, which is kind of a unique way that Fujifilm has decided to be able to handle high contrast, especially images that have a lot of reds in them, that they tend to blow out the details, and the color chrome effect can actually retain the details in the reds and in any strong color. And so again, I'll put the link down below, but so color science does make a difference. And for those of you that have shot with the GFX system will see that what a great combination of the X series color science, the X processing, the X Processor Pro in here, with this larger sensor, you get beautiful pictures. And so that's my first impressions of the GFX 50R. I've shot with the 50S for over a year, so I pretty much know what the files will look like. So it just kind of comes down to how you shoot. And for me, shooting on the street, the 50R makes a lot more sense. But I know that I've talked to other photographers, a lot of them actually still prefer the 50S because they do shoot in studio, and they like the versatility and the various accessories that you do get with the 50S, which you will not get with the 50R, like swappable different viewfinders, as well as having a booster grip and other accessories that you can put on that. So this is a little bit more limiting, but it's $1,000 cheaper, and now we're getting to the price point where these digital medium formats are getting close to the price of the top end 35mm or full frame DSLRs, as well as the new mirrorless that's coming out. And so that's it. That's my first thoughts. Thanks for watching. I'll have this for a few more days, and of course, when the production copy comes out, I will be getting a brand new in the box, and I'll be doing an unboxing video at that time. But I'll be keep on shooting with this until I have to give it back to Fujifilm. And so look for my articles both on Fuji Love and Medium Format Magazine, which is a brand new magazine that's out, and I'm contributing some articles to this, and that's where this camera is going to next after me, is going to Olaf. And so I'll put the links down below, and that's it. Thanks for watching, and happy shooting. All right. Whew. Peace.